Good morning, President, Your Honors, ladies and gentlemen. This special sitting of the Caribbean Court of Justice is convened to pay tribute to the late Madam Justice Désirée Bernard, CCH OR, retired judge of the court. President. President.
Are you hearing me? I seem to have been having a difficulty.
We are hearing you now, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. Chancellor, colleagues, Justice Désirée Bernard is often credited, and rightly so, with establishing an impressive number of firsts. For example, she was the first female Chief Justice, not just of Guyana, but throughout the entire British Commonwealth. And of course, she was the only woman to be appointed a judge of the CCJ among the first cohort of 7 judges. Since then, we have been blessed to have Justice Maureen Rajnath Lee, and in time to come, we will have, I'm sure, many more women sitting as CCJ judges. The mere recounting of all the various occasions Justice Bernard shattered the glass ceiling gives us a wonderful insight into her accomplishments and her caliber. It does not, however, convey the full picture of the breadth of her contribution to the region. To get that picture, we must ask and answer some piercing questions. How is it that she was invariably the first? Surely there were other women around from whom to select or appoint. What did the appointing or electing body see in her that made her at the relevant time better or more noble or more fitting, more qualified than any other woman? What are the attributes of hers that so stood out, whether in the national, regional, or international arenas, that time and time again she outshone all others? These questions deserve answers. And over the last week, in an effort to gain some little clarity, I've been reflecting on my own personal experiences with her, and in the process, reading through her book of reflections and opinions, which she published in 2018. If you knew her, or if you read her speeches, the attribute of Désirée that is immediately evident is her self-effacing humility. Although she attained the highest judicial post in Guyana, she carried herself no differently from the way she might have if she were, for example, a mere judicial clerk. She carried herself with dignity, with pride, with quiet confidence, but without airs or arrogance or affectations of any kind. She never craved the limelight. Indeed, when she was the obvious star in the room, she always tried to find a way to turn the spotlight away from herself. In this regard, her book itself is interesting. It is not an autobiography. There's no chapter in it in which she speaks about herself or calls attention to any of her groundbreaking or spectacular achievements. It is a publication of papers she has authored or speeches she has given. And throughout those writings, the pronoun I is seldom to be found. She was always approachable and moved easily among the masses. In those early days at the CCJ, I remember a group of us judges attending a carnival tent one night down there at the Cement and Waterfront Workers Union that's on that famous street in Port of Spain.
Ryson Road, President.
Ryson Road. Senior moment. To my surprise, when we got there, and in the course of enjoying the show, we discovered that she was well known to a few of the performers, as she had been there on a couple of occasions previously and had personally interacted with some of them. Last week, when we had the funeral service of Justice Labusty, the Archbishop made the very salient point that mercy is inseparable from justice, that a vital ingredient of justice is mercy. Désirée understood this very well and lived it, practiced it. And I was privileged to be alongside her on one occasion when I saw it being put into practice in a very graphic manner. She and I were both members of the West Indies Cricket Disciplinary Tribunal. And one day we had before us a charge that was laid against a particular player. The offense was a very serious one, and it was admitted by the player. It would have been a very easy fix simply to impose upon the player the severe punishment the offense warranted. Principally through Justice Bernard's instrumentality, the proceedings took a different turn. We did impose a proportionate, reasonable disciplinary sanction, but Désirée's searching questions and her general approach looked beyond the issue of offense penalty. I won't get into the details. Safe to say that ultimately, the West Indies Cricket Board was instructed by us to offer professional psychological services to the player. And when the player indicated to us that their two cricketing heroes were Viv Richards and Chris Gale, the board was also requested to make these two stars available to meet with and to mentor the player. The progress on that mentorship by the two stars and on the professional psychological services were to be reported on periodically. In short, justice was served by the penalty imposed, but in the interest of the player and West Indies cricket, the tribunal tempered justice with mercy. And that player went on to serve West Indies cricket in an excellent manner for quite some time. One of Désirée's enduring qualities was the extent to which she looked out for others, especially so other women, the powerless, and those in need of the protection of the law. Throughout her entire professional life, her stellar achievements were always cast by her in the light of how they facilitated others better to succeed. And so, for example, on the 3rd of October, 1980, in her finest hour, when she was responding briefly to the many accolades bestowed upon her by the members of the bar at her first sitting as a High Court judge, her address concentrated on thanking all the persons who had helped her achieve the significant milestone. And then she stated in typical fashion, and I quote, "It is my sincere hope that my appointment will be the forerunner of many more appointments of women, not only in the legal field, but in all top-level and managerial positions in our country," unquote. At that time, when she was the first female judge appointed and all the tributes were being paid to her, she was not thinking of herself. She was not thinking of even other female lawyers only. She was thinking of all the women in Guyana who, whether through prejudice or otherwise, were not being afforded the top level and managerial positions they so eminently deserved. Fast forward a few decades later, and her wish, her example, her mentorship has resulted, among other achievements, in the two top judicial posts in Guyana being currently held by women, women who were coached by Justice Bernard. Undoubtedly, Désirée's worldview was significantly impacted by the international movement to rid the world of all forms of discrimination against women. The United Nations had galvanized this movement with a women's conference held in Mexico City in 1975. That conference designated 1975 to 1985 as the UN Decade for Women. A set of goals was proclaimed for countries to attain over that 10-year period in order to advance women's rights around the world. And these goals and the various measures were encapsulated in the 1979 Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW Convention. Justice Bernard threw herself into the achievement of the goals of the convention. She served as both rapporteur from 1982 to 1984 and chair from 1985 to 1989 of the committee that propelled the elimination of discrimination against women. Through her exposure to these experiences, she in turn impacted and influenced many of her progressive colleagues in the region, both male and female. It would be a grave mistake to think of her, though, as solely preoccupied with or only championing the cause of women's rights. That is far from the case. In her calm and understated manner, she was what I would describe as a Caribbean nationalist, an ardent supporter of the development of a Caribbean jurisprudence that was, in her words, quote, peculiar to our needs, culture, traditions, and regional objectives, unquote. She considered that Caribbean judges should not feel obliged faithfully to follow English common law or decisions of the House of Lords that did not appreciate the uniqueness of our own local conditions. Several decades before the inauguration of the Caribbean Court of Justice, she was championing the move for the region to establish its own final court of appeal. Her magnificent address in the British Virgin Islands in 1991, titled The Impact of the English Common Law on Caribbean Society, should be required reading for every judge and legal professional in the region. In that address, she painstakingly went through several areas of the law to demonstrate the anomalies and bizarre consequences that resulted from an unquestioning and needless genuflection to English common law. She concluded that, and I quote, one can never overemphasize the urgency for the courts of our region to develop a jurisprudence of our own by modifying or expanding the common law to meet local situations and the justice of a particular case, unquote. But she is not a narrow-minded nationalist or isolationist. She also called on Caribbean judges to apply international treaties in a manner that would provide remedies for wrongs suffered by citizens. It was also in this speech in 1991 that she boldly stated that the Privy Council, and I quote, is a court whose swan song must be sung. Several of England's former colonies have severed the umbilical cord and established final courts of their own. But we in the Caribbean seem reluctant to leave the nest and fly away with our own wings. Our failure so far to have established our own final court demonstrates our lack of faith and confidence in our jurists and legal academics, unquote. This was in 1991. In 1983, the CARICOM Secretariat introduced the CARICOM Triennial Award to acknowledge the landmark contributions of inspiring and distinguished Caribbean women. Unsurprisingly and fittingly, Justice Bernard is a recipient of this award. She was selected to receive it in 2005, and it was a most appropriate form of recognition of her service to the region as a whole. The passing of Madam Justice Désirée Bernard is a monumental loss, I know, to you, Caroline, to her family members, to her loved ones. It is also a significant loss to the legal and judicial fraternity throughout Guyana and the region, and generally to the entire Caribbean community and indeed the world community. I extend deepest condolences to you at this time, Caroline. Your mom was very special. May she rest in peace. At this juncture, I am going to ask us to observe a minute's silence, commencing now. Thank you. I now call on Madam Justice Rajdantley to give her remarks.
Thank you, President. President, Chancellor, colleagues, good morning to all. I first saw Justice Désirée Bernard on Saturday, the 16th of April, 2005. Several eminent persons from across the Caribbean, heads of government, heads of judiciaries, ministers of government, judges, lawyers, had gathered at Queen's Hall in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, to witness the swearing-in of the inaugural bench of the Caribbean Court of Justice. This was a dream come true, I told myself, as I sat there witnessing this significant event. The majority of the people of the Commonwealth Caribbean had demonstrated their faith in Caribbean judges, our judges, and had agreed that there should be a final apex court in the Caribbean to which the appeals of the Commonwealth Caribbean region would be brought. I was a young High Court judge at that time, and allow me to put young in quotation marks. As I sat among that distinguished group at Queen's Hall, I observed the men who were to take their oath of office. But what stood out above all else for me was this woman, the only woman to take the oath that day. Who was she? What were her accomplishments? How did she get there? I wondered. A few months later, I would meet Justice Désirée Bernard, or Désirée, as we lovingly called her. She was not proud or bumptious, as we would say in Trinidad. She was humble, kind, and like our brother, Justice Jacob Witt, so very respectful of the views of others. One could not tell that she had accomplished so much. You must have read or you heard that even today, President told us about her many professional firsts. First among them, first woman judge and first woman to be elevated to the Court of Appeal of Guyana, first woman Chief Justice of Guyana and in the Commonwealth Caribbean, and first woman Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana and in the Commonwealth Caribbean. Many tributes have been paid to Justice Bernard over the years, and she has received many awards during her lifetime. My colleague, Justice Winston Anderson, and I were particularly delighted that Justice Bernard was selected as one of 34 pioneering Caribbean women jurists whose outstanding lives and achievements were honored as part of the CCJ Academy for Law Eminent Caribbean Jurists Series in 2021. It must have pleased Justice Bernard tremendously that two eminent daughters of Guyana, the Honourable Madam Justice Yonette Cummins, Chancellor of Guyana, and the Honourable Madam Justice Roxanne George, Chief Justice of Guyana, co-authored the chapter on her life. But as I continue this tribute, allow me to focus on three aspects of Justice Bernard's remarkable life, things that I will not forget. First, and I believe President mentioned it today, Justice Bernard was self-effacing and gracious. She would say that she did not understand why we were making all that fuss about her. You see, we, the women judges of the Caribbean, thought the world of her. In September 2015, Justice Bernard was installed as the first patron of the Caribbean Association of Women Judges to a memorable and rousing tribute performed by Justice Jacqueline Cornelius of Barbados, a tribute both in word and in song. That song, Lioness on the Rise by Queen Ifrica, was a fitting recognition of the strengths and abilities of Justice Bernard. Second, Justice Bernard never climbed the ladder of success alone. As she climbed, she always looked for ways to pull up other women, and in particular, other women judges. Such was her inner strength. I recall her saying to me on one occasion when I was hesitant to accede to a particular request, "Maureen, why do you not have confidence in yourself? You will do fine." I wish to acknowledge here and make it a public record that Justice Bernard was always kind and generous to me. I recall attending a law conference with her in 2006. As a judge of the CCJ, Justice Bernard was invited to sit with heads of judiciaries and the like at the gala ceremony. To my surprise, she made sure that a place was found for me at that table. Third, Justice Bernard was a woman of deep faith. As one considers her outstanding achievements, one may ask, what factors combine to produce this woman of excellence, humility, and generosity? Justice Bernard herself gave us an important clue about 10 years ago. In an interview with journalist Yvonne Babulal, published in the Guardian newspapers in Trinidad on the 5th of March 2014, Justice Bernard spoke openly and eagerly of her deep spirituality. "I do not do anything in life without prayer," she declared. "God has always been my guide and my mentor. Indeed, it has been acknowledged that as part of her service to her beloved church, Justice Bernard was the first woman to be installed Chancellor of the Anglican Diocese of Guyana and the first in the province of the West Indies." As I close, I wish to record that throughout her professional life, Justice Bernard was a tireless advocate for the rights of women and girls, as we heard already from President this morning. In particular, she was deeply concerned that the rights of women in common law relationships should be recognized. In the appeal from Barbados of OO against BK 2023 CCJ 10, the Caribbean Court of Justice acknowledged that Justice Bernard had written extensively on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and we heard today how very much involved she was. We wrote in that case about Justice Bernard's writing on that convention and its role in enhancing the human rights of women. The CCJ noted that she often focused on the issue of discrimination against unmarried women and women in common law relationships. She was also closely involved in promoting a culture of nonviolence in Caribbean societies, especially as it concerned women and girls. As long ago as 1998, she closed her remarks on the International Day Against Violence Against Women by pointing out, the time to act has come. We are all involved. We shall all be consumed. We may have in place all of the laws to protect women, men, and children from violence, whether physical or sexual. But unless we are sensitized to the need for action, the laws will be meaningless. We can no longer stand silently by and remain uninvolved. We need to break the silence and exhibit zero tolerance for acts of violence. We must aim to promote in our society a culture of nonviolence and respect for human rights. May I say that Justice Bernard's comments are as relevant today as they were in 1998. As I close, we thank Caroline and the entire family for sharing Désirée with us. To know Désirée was to love Désirée. May she rest in peace and may her memory be a blessing. Thank you, President.
President of
Thank
the
you,
Caribbean Court of
Justice
Justice.
Rajwatli. Yes, proceed, Chancellor.
Thank you, Justice Saunders. Justice Saunders, distinguished judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice, distinguished heads of judiciary, esteemed Chief Justice and judges of the Supreme Court of Guyana and regional judiciaries, judicial officers, members of the inner bar, members of the outer bar, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed an honor and a privilege for me to pay tribute on behalf of the Judiciary of Guyana to the memory of the late Justice Désirée Patricia Bernard. I have had the privilege of appearing before Justice Bernard in the Court of Appeal of Guyana whilst I was a member of the Chambers of the Director of Public Prosecutions in Guyana here and working alongside her when I became a High Court judge. Thus, I have fond memories of a fine lady, a pioneering woman jurist, a daughter of Guyana's soil, a recipient of two of Guyana's highest awards, a Caribbean trailblazer who paved the way for others to follow. The impermanence of life is aptly captured in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 19, which says, "From dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." However, as Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote in his poem, A Psalm of Life, that was not spoken of the soul. Hence, we celebrate the life and the legacy of a beautiful soul, that of Justice Désirée Bernard. Born in Georgetown on the 2nd of March, 1939, Justice Bernard began her outstanding educational journey at the St. Ambrose Primary School in Georgetown and later took pride of place at the prestigious the Bishop's High School. Thereafter, she read for her Bachelor's of Laws degree, graduating with honors from the University of London in 1963. Justice Bernard's illustrious career then started with the law firm of Cameron and Shepherd, and after participating in private practice, she ascended the bench. It was on the bench that her contribution to the development of the law and her legacy, which is most remarkable and which will be addressed today. Her Honor was a trailblazer and paved the way for women to join the legal fraternity and the judiciary of Guyana. It was there that she made her exit and entrances and played many parts and received many firsts. Justice Bernard, as a trailblazer and as a woman of many notable firsts, did not allow that fact to prevent her from seeking higher heights in her career. And she was always conscious of the tremendous load she had to carry and the potential she had to execute her tasks and the examples she had to set. Thus, very early in her career, on being appointed as a High Court judge in October 1980, she remarked, and I quote, "There is a great disadvantage in being the first in any field of endeavors. There is no precedent, no rules or examples to guide and follow. One has to strike out one's own and become a trailblazer, thereby leaving a path for others to follow." Unquote. In a similar vein, after being appointed a judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Her Honor said this, and I quote, "I am conscious that this carries with it certain responsibilities, chief among them being the ability to administer justice to the people of the Caribbean, regardless of gender." The fact that Her Honor looked out for others is evident. References was made to this by President Saunders and Justice Maureen Rajnotley just a while ago. Justice Bernard nurtured and mentored young counsel, not only in the law, but in decorum, in conduct and etiquette at the bar, and generally on life. I recall her at times having to call to her chambers young attorneys who dared to show off plunging and revealing necklines and micro minis and mini dresses, or men with happy socks or colorful ties. And she would have reminded them of the dress code in our jurisdiction. The judiciary of Guyana, I'm happy to say, still has in effect the dress code issued under her hands and stewardship. Our care for others is also borne out when we read more of her speech on her elevation to the High Court, when Her Honor said, "It is my sincere hope that my appointment will be the forerunner of many more appointments for women, not only in the legal field, but in all top level and managerial positions in our country." This is indeed a significant day for women in Guyana and one tinged with a touch of history. I feel deeply honored and humbled to have been chosen as part of that history, unquote. Those were indeed profound thoughts and perhaps words of prophecy, which were spot on and have borne fruit. They have come to pass. Today in Guyana, the top judicial positions of Chancellor, Chief Justice, Registrar, Deputy Registrar, Chief Magistrate are all held by women. In the wider Caribbean, the judiciaries of Belize, Eastern Caribbean courts, and Turks and Caicos boast female heads of judiciary. We are indeed touched and humbled at the same time to be part of that history which Justice Bernard prognosticated. I can safely say that Justice Bernard did not have a sense of having arrived and sitting on one's laurels, and she worked hard, perhaps 10 times harder than her male counterpart, and showed her worth. Thus, the law reports of Guyana, the Commonwealth law reports, the Caribbean Courts of Justice website and law reports, and the West Indian law reports are all replete with numerous landmark judgments authored by Justice Bernard. These judgments range from family law, constitutional administrative law, labor law, and many other areas of law, contributing to the rich tapestry of our local and the Caribbean jurisprudence. Justice Bedard is particularly remembered for her contribution to the improvement of the lives of women and children in Guyana. What stands out most in this regard is her work that resulted in legislative reform in our laws, uh, particularly for the removal of discrimination against children born out of wedlock, women in common law relationship, and the plight of women generally in society. The enactment of trilogy legislation is credit to her in terms of the Married Persons Property Amendment Act in 1990, the Family and Dependence Provision Act, and the Equal Rights Act. Justice Bernard was a rapporteur of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and served as a chairperson to that body. She was a founder member of the Guyana Association of Women Lawyers and a patron also of that association, as well as a patron of the Caribbean Association of Women Judges. And you heard of her deep love for her God and her faith, and as a result, being honored with the position of Chancellor of the Anglican Diocese in Guyana. Her honor was bestowed with many other accolades, including the doctorate in law from the University of West Indies and from our own University of Guyana. This Caribbean woman was also honored by CARICOM with the Triennial Award for Women in 2005, and in her acceptance speech, Her Honor said this: "I am happy to have made some contribution towards improving the status of women in our part of the world, the highest being my service both as chairperson and founder member from the Caribbean of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women." Justice Bernard has served well, putting service above self. She has fought a good fight, she has finished the race, and she has kept the faith. And I do believe that as a result of all her hard work, her selfless service, the accolades mentioned in the book of Matthew, chapter 25 and verse 23, have been bestowed on her. Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will set you over many things. Enter now into the joy of thy Lord. Justice Bernard has transitioned to another court. She has gone to a higher calling. She has left, though, indelible footprints on the sands of time. Footprints which we, sailing over life's solemn main, seeing, shall take heart again, just to borrow from the words of Longfellow in Psalms of Life. Her cherished memories will forever live on in our hearts, and may it provide strength and comfort to all those who mourn her loss at this difficult time. To Caroline, to Dr. Stewart, and our sorrowing relatives, our prayers are with you, and we stand with you and remind you of the words from the headstone on the tomb in Ireland that says, those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near. Still loved, still missed, and very dear. Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. Please accept our deepest condolences. I thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Mr. Walker, President of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations.
Honourable Justice Saunders, President of the CCJ. Just from a technical perspective, just making sure that I can be heard. Thank you. Honourable Justice Cummings Edwards, Chancellor of the Supreme Court of Guyana. Honourable judges of the CCJ. Honourable members of the judiciary. family of the late Honourable Justice Bernard, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations extends sincere condolences on the passing of the Honourable Madam Justice Désirée Bernard. We express condolences to her family, particularly her daughter Caroline, as well as her relatives, colleagues, and friends in Guyana and throughout the world. We console the Caribbean Court of Justice family and her colleagues at the Guyanese bench and bar. Désirée Bernard, as we have heard in these tributes, distinguished herself with many firsts. She's recalled as serving with distinction as the first female Justice of Appeal in the Court of Appeal of the Supreme Court of Guyana, the first female Chief Justice of Guyana, the first female Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana and the Caribbean, and the first female Judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Akba further recalls her sterling international service as a member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the International Association of Women Judges, and as Vice President of the International Federation of Women Lawyers. We further recall her excellent service to our region as a Chancellor of the Anglican Diocese of Guyana, and then Chancellor in the province of the West Indies. We recall her excellent work as President of ACBA and her service on the Council of Legal Education. For all this, as well as her inspirational legacy, ACBA was honored to present the Distinguished ACBA Award to Désirée Bernard in a presentation ceremony held in Miami, Florida in June 2019. And we, at that special ceremony, we had wonderful and inspiring words delivered to us by Justice Bernard, charging regional lawyers to pursue their practice with excellence and the highest ethical standards. Sir Dennis Byron, a former president of this honorable court, in his tribute to Justice Bernard, said these words: Justice Bernard was a testament to the high quality of Caribbean intellectualism, integrity, and work ethic. Her life brought credit to her family, her native country Guyana, as well as the wider Caribbean. And I salute her as one of the most outstanding people I've had the honor to know. Justice Bernard's journey was one of courage, resilience, and determination, end quote. We agree and echo these kind sentiments. In further tribute to Justice Bernard, we reflect on her work and worth with a simple Japanese haiku, which is a Japanese poem. And those of you who have heard me making tributes on behalf of ACBA in the past weeks have heard me refer to a Japanese haiku. And the haiku that I've chosen for Justice Bernard reads like this: Strong woman stands tall, like a lake, calm and steadfast, reflecting power. These simple yet powerful words sum up a life of unconditional service above self, a life of a true exemplar, a life well lived. So, I submit, all we can do now is follow in her footsteps, and in our own way and time, create our own pathways of excellence, of the highest ethical standards. All we can do today is to simply and meaningfully, and with love and respect, say thank you to Justice Désirée Bernard. The bar associations in the 16 jurisdictions of the Commonwealth Caribbean that comprise ACBA, specifically Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, the British Virgin Islands, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Turks and Caicos Islands collectively and unanimously salute the Honourable Justice Désirée Bernard as a trailblazer par excellence at the Caribbean bench and at the bar. She will be remembered for her lasting and immeasurable contributions to our Commonwealth Caribbean jurisprudence and our rich legal pedagogy and case law, which will be forever better for her considered input and meaningful judgments. May we continue to find comfort and inspiration in her lasting legacy. May Justice Désirée Bernard rest in eternal peace and light perpetual shine upon her. May it please you, my lords.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. Mr. Bert Smith, President of the Bar Association of Guyana.
Thank you, Your Honor. Honourable President, Mr. Justice Adrian Saunders, Justices of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Honourable Heads of Judiciary, Senior Counsel, President Walker, and other colleague Bar Association presidents, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Guyana Bar Association, I wish to thank the Court for the opportunity to address the special sitting held in honor of the late Madam Justice Désirée Bernard, ORCCH, whose mortal soul departed this earthly abode recently. As in the past week, we do not delight in occasions such as this. They provide an opportunity to record for posterity the highlights of a superlative career. As others have referred, Madam Justice Bernard was a student of the Bishop's High School. She completed her law degree from the University of London in 1963 and began private practice as a solicitor. I recall her journey to qualification being described richly by the late Mr. Stanley Moore, Senior Counsel, at the sitting in honor of Justice Bernard's retirement in 2014, where he described their long and arduous studies during that period. It was a challenging time in British Guyana, with the social, economic, and political travails of that late pre-independence period. No doubt a difficult time at which one can conclude studies and come of age. Justice Bernard practiced as a solicitor until the profession was fused in 1980. The West Indian reports are filled with references to her cases. I have no doubt that the leading barristers with whom she engaged were always delighted to benefit from her competence, clarity of writing, and undoubted efficiency. Around that time, in 1980, Justice Bernard was invited by Chancellor Crane to become a judge of the High Court. Again, this period was also tumultuous, and joining what was then an all-male judiciary must have been a daunting prospect for a young woman. In the best of times, being a judge requires great courage, independence, and always an almost vicious indifference to public criticism. As a trailblazer, Justice Bernard required this in buckets. A good example would have been her judgment in cases involving the government of then-President Janet Reagan. Others have referred to her leading decisions. They cover the full spectrum of legal issues, and many of them, both reported and unreported, continue to be cited daily in the courts in Ghana and other places with similar jurisprudence. They are most significant for the ease with which one can read them. You can easily understand what are the issues amongst the parties. You can follow readily the survey of relevant cases and statutes, and Justice Bernard's path to the correct outcome. I can visualize litigants being able to read them personally and understand the reasons of the court without being lost in excessive legalese. When she became the first Chief Justice, Justice of the Court of Appeal in Guyana, Chancellor of Guyana, and a woman judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Madam Justice Bernard's impressive body of work made her selection an easy decision. It was remarkable that with such a stellar career, she led always with humility. Her outstanding work ensured that questions of gender were irrelevant to her appointment. As is said of many other trailblazers, Justice Bernard kicked down so many doors that those who follow are unable to recognize that there was ever any barrier to their own entry. Her work will live on. I think the equally remarkable aspect of her career was the time that she made for non-judicial and even non-legal causes. Her work on the repeal of the Bastardy Act and the amendments and introduction of important family legislation is significant. Her work on the elimination of discrimination against women and other members of the community stands out. She was a leader of progressive causes. One wonders, on occasions such as this, what would the contemporary causes be where discrimination remains, and which a jurist like Madam Justice Bernard would find unacceptable and work to reform. The organization she led or founded is not a short list. Caribbean Women's Association, OCBA, the Georgetown Legal Aid Clinic, the Toastmasters Club, the Ghana Consumers Association, the Ghana Girl Guides. She was a founder and patron of the Ghana Association of Women Lawyers, and my colleague President Ms. Lal is here today to speak on their behalf. This is an exceptional legal group which does real work and provides real service. And it does so without much fanfare, perhaps reflective of the temperament of its founder. That I am so far ineligible for membership is an enduring disappointment. As Justice Rajnatni noted, of personal significance to me was that she was a woman of great faith. This has also struck other speakers. As a fellow parishioner of the Christchurch Anglican Church for many years, I got to know her casually. While she was Chancellor of the Ghana Judiciary, she also served as Chancellor of the Anglican Diocese in Ghana, providing legal counsel to the bishop, trustees, and clergy. She led the revisions to the diocesan regulations in the year 2000. Mr. President, since I'm also the registrar of that diocese, permit me to note on behalf of Bishop Davidson and other members of Christchurch our gratitude for her service to our community. I wish to thank the court for the opportunity to address the sitting and to offer my thanks to the relatives and loved ones for the long and wonderful service that they allowed her to offer to her country and the community. May her soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birdsmith. Ms. Alana Lal, President of the Ghana Association of Women Lawyers.
Honourable Justice Adrian Saunders, President of the CCJ. Thank you. Honourable Madam Justice Yonette Cummings Edwards, Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana. Distinguished judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice, the courts of Guyana and the wider Caribbean. Presidents of the Organization of the Caribbean Bar Association, Guyana Bar Association, and other bar associations. Colleagues and members of the INA and OTA Bar, family and friends, good morning. The Guyana Association of Women Lawyers is honored to be afforded the opportunity to make remarks at this special sitting of the Caribbean Court of Justice in honor of Justice Désirée Patricia Bernard, OR CCH. Justice Bernard is well known for her pioneering and trailblazing appointments to the judicial bench of the High Court and the Court of Appeal of Guyana, being the first woman judge and Justice of Appeal, Chief Justice and Chancellor of Judiciary of Guyana, and on her retirement, the first woman judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Prior to this, as a practitioner, she was the first woman president of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations. In addition, she served on the international stage as a member and then chair of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and as vice president of the International Federation of Women Lawyers. She was also a member of the Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association, the International Association of Women Judges, the Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers, and the first patron of the Caribbean Association of Women Judges. The association would like to focus, however, on her pioneering service in mentoring women lawyers in Guyana. In April 1987, 8 female legal practitioners at the Guyana Bar gathered briefly in a courtroom. Among the group was Madam Justice Désirée Bernard, together with Ms. Josephine Whitehead, now Senior Counsel, Carol James Boston, now Senior Counsel, Hazel Dawn, and the late Deborah Baca, Sheila Chapman, Elvie Edwards, and Pearline Roach. The result of this was the formation of the Guyana Association of Women Lawyers, with Justice Bernard as the founder president. Theirs was the view that women lawyers who were in a predominantly male bar should work together to address legal issues of particular importance to women and children, since the group could accomplish much more for these vulnerable litigants than could individual attorneys. Thus is the motto of the Guyana Association of Women Lawyers, women supporting justice and equality. Throughout the years, the association has sought to demonstrate this through the introduction of gender-sensitive legislation, the distribution of informative flyers on the legal rights of persons, the conduct of legal workshops and outreaches, and working closely with the Guyana Legal Aid Clinic and other stakeholders, such as the Women and Gender Equality Commission. One of the most seminal pieces of the association, and a credit to the Honourable Madam Justice Bernard and other past presidents, is our Law New booklet. We launched the 5th edition of this booklet in 2023, and the Spanish version is scheduled to be launched this year. In shattering the proverbial glass ceiling, Justice Bernard opened the doors for many of us women lawyers to follow in several areas of the legal arena. She was a lady of firsts and an amazing daughter of the soil, for which she was awarded national honors of the Cassie Crown of Honor and the Order of Roraima, among many other accolades, including honorary doctorates by the University of the West Indies and the University of Guyana. Justice Bernard continued to pay a keen interest in the association even after she acceded to the bench at the Caribbean Court of Justice and attended functions of the association whenever she was in Guyana. In her message to the association on its 25th anniversary, and as a testament of her dedication to empowering women in law, she said, "Long and dedicated service is my sincere wish for the future as the association's torch continues to burn brighter and it is passed on to future members, hopefully imbued with the same commitment and unswerving zeal in ensuring the preservation and development of the rights of women in our society." We hope to always strive for this in the association as we continue to carry the torch so ably lit by our founding member and first president, Madam Justice Bernard. Over the years, she has mentored many female lawyers through her leadership and vision, which has inspired us to continue the work of the association. In 2021, Justice Bernard became an honorary member of our association. The Guyana Association of Women Lawyers therefore honors her many years of service, her significant contribution to the improvement of women's rights, and her contribution to the jurisprudence and administration of justice in Guyana and the wider Caribbean. The Guyana Association of Women Lawyers extends deep condolences to her family, colleagues, and all who knew and admired her. May her soul rest in peace. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, we now have a short tribute in the form of a video presentation.
You always have to have time for people. You know, once you can, if you try to help people as you go through life, that in itself is gratitude.
I now call on the representative of staff, Ms. Wendy Mitchell, to give some remarks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols having been observed, it is my great pleasure to share with you a glimpse of the picturesque life and legacy of the late Honourable Madam Justice Désirée Patricia Bernard, OR CCH. Maya Angelou once said, if you're going to live, leave a legacy. Make a mark on the world that can't be erased. This quote by Dr. Angelou aptly sums up the remarkable life and legacy of one of Guyana's finest daughters and the region's most distinguished women, Madam Justice Désirée Bernard. The speakers before me have all outlined the accomplishments of the notable firsts achieved by Madam Justice Bernard. But for the Guyanese people, and more so from her hometown of Plaisance, she was simply Désirée. Born in the land of the mighty Roraima, Justice Bernard held a deep love for her country and its people. From a young age, she demonstrated a strong commitment to serving others and making a positive impact on society. Her journey was not without challenges, but she faced them with grace, courage, and unwavering determination. As evidenced from the speeches of the previous speakers, Madam Justice Bernard's legal career blazed the path for women in Guyana and the wider Caribbean. She shattered numerous glass ceilings with her notable first appointments, which have all been recounted by the speakers today. Yet if we're to have a sit-down conversation with a woman who epitomizes the height of humility and grace, she would gently remind you, and I quote, I didn't set out to be the first of anything. My first concern is whether you are up for the task. The achievement itself is secondary. If honor comes after, they come. This was the very essence of the woman who created pathways for young girls and women in Guyana and the wider Caribbean, including myself, to easily walk through today. Throughout her distinguished career, Justice Bernard exemplified wisdom and compassion in her approach to the law, ensuring always that fairness and the rule of equity were the golden thread of the notable judgments she penned, all the while ensuring that the people of Guyana knew she understood and appreciated the meaning of our motto, one people, one nation, and one destiny. Justice Bernard was the people's judge. Her office was very much an open door where anyone could have gone and sought her wise counsel and had intriguing conversations about the law and particularly how much Guyanese cuisine was the best in the Caribbean. In particular, Justice Bernard sang praises to the local Guyanese delicacy of egg ball and tennis roll and cheese, which she often hinted highlighted the simplicity yet deliciousness of Guyanese cuisine. Indeed, Justice Bernard's impact extends far beyond the courtroom. I fondly recall the visit to her home by all the secretaries and a few other staff members of the court for an afternoon of fun, games about Caribbean dialect, and chit-chat. Through advocacy for equality, humanity, and social justice, she has inspired countless individuals to stand for what is right and just. The remarkable legacy of this Guyanese sunbeam and pioneering Caribbean jurist serves as a beacon of hope for those who seek a more equitable and inclusive society. As we reflect on the life and legacy of her today, of Justice Bernard's contributions, let us remember that true greatness is measured not by the titles we hold, but by the lives we touch and the positive change we bring about. As stated by her then secretary, Mrs. Andrea Sohan Cooper, Justice Bernard and I shared a unique relationship. We were more than just superior and subordinate. She treated me like her daughter, and I in turn considered her as a motherly figure in my life. The time spent working with her was filled with fun memories, events, and laughter. They will always be embedded in my soul and will always be cherished and remembered. Justice Bernard's legacy will continue to inspire future generations to strive for a world where justice prevails and all individuals are treated with dignity and respect. Her memory should be honored by us, emulating her values and principles in our own lives. Remembering the quote from the Shakespearean play of Hamlet, where the advice that the king's advisor, Polonius, gives to his son, Laertes, before he leaves home for France at Act 2, Scene 3, was this, and I quote, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not be false to any man," unquote. May Justice Bernard's soul rest in eternal peace and rise in glory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mitchell. And finally, I call upon a loved family member of Justice Bernard, Dr. Stewart.
I would like to begin by thanking the Honourable Justice Saunders and the CCJ for giving me the opportunity to express the collective grief of our family for the loss of our beloved, the Honourable Madam Justice Désirée Patricia Bernard, whom we lovingly refer to as PB. From very early on, we were never satisfied with simple answers. She was never satisfied with simple answers, but always probed deeply, seeking the explanation for matters which engaged her attention. It was therefore not at all surprising that she chose to pursue a career in the field of law and, against considerable odds, rose to the ranks of a previously male-dominated judiciary and trailblazed her way to a number of firsts, including becoming the first female Chief Justice and Chancellor of the Guyana Judiciary, followed by being the only female judge appointed to the CCJ at its inception. She was indeed a brilliant jurist who cared deeply about improving the life and practice of law and its impact on the lives of people who depend on the system for fairness and impartiality. Over the many years, many tributes listing her numerous achievements and awards are well documented. I ask your indulgence to permit me the luxury of focusing on the cousin that I enjoyed spending a great deal of time with over the years. A cousin that was loved dearly and will be missed beyond measure by her family. She was a gentle and compassionate woman who, despite her many achievements, preferred not always to be in the spotlight, even though her mere presence demanded respect and attention, not only from admirers, but surprisingly also from adversaries. At the end of a busy work week, she always found some time to be with her family and friends. I remember well those weekends spent playing dominoes at Aunt Monica's house. PB brought the same analytical approach to the game because she never liked losing a battle. And she was often accused of taking too much time planning her next moves. But to no avail. I should add, she would agree with, and I don't think she would agree with me on the latter. A very sharp wit and wonderful sense of humor. She was always ready to engage in lively debates with family members. She cared deeply for her family and for the people who worked for her. They were also her family. She was someone always that we could depend on when the occasion arose. PB, though a fierce as a jurist, was kind and approachable. She had a big heart that extended her benevolence to many that came into contact with her, mentoring younger colleagues, providing financial and other assistance to the children of her employees, and even to those she didn't know as well. She was a woman of strong faith and belief in God, and gave generously of her time to serve as Chancellor of the Anglican Archdiocese. Our family is truly moved and heartened by the many laudatory expressions articulated by her colleagues and friends here today. We take great comfort in the knowledge that she was determined and well loved by so many. I'd like to take also this opportunity to mention her daughter, who stood solidly by her side in every endeavor, and whom I suspect will emulate her emulance and brilliance in the field of law. Let me say in closing that we have all been blessed to have a part of Désirée Bernard's story. A beautiful spirit and a bright light has traveled away, but we are reassured that those we love can never be more than a thought away. For as long as there's a memory, they live in our hearts and stay. May her soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stewart. And once again, on behalf of all my colleagues, the staff of the Caribbean Court of Justice, the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission, on my own behalf of my wife, we extend very deepest condolences to you, to Caroline, to all the loved ones of Justice Bernard. This concludes this morning's sitting. We will endeavor to have all of the speeches transcribed and made available to the family members of Justice Bernard. Madam Registrar, would you please bring the proceedings to a close?
Thank you, President Saunders, Mr. Justice Anderson, Madam Justice Rajnath Lee, Mr. Justice Barrow, Mr. Justice Burgess, and Mr. Justice Jamida. Thank you also to Madam Justice Cummings Edwards, Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana, and all esteemed speakers and specially invited guests. Finally, thank you to the court staff. This court now stands adjourned.